This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News. And Conservative groups at Guildford and Waverley councils are furious after the council leader of Waverley Borough Council was inadvertently recorded in a preamble to a council executive meeting on Tuesday, asking for a report laying out the options for the unitary authorities to be created, which is being created as part of the reorganisation of local government. And he was asking for that report to be skewed. He made his request to the joint CEO for Guildford and Waverley, Pedro Roble, who told him it was already in hand. Councillor Paul Follows is here with me online now to try and explain. Councillor Follows, welcome back to the Dragon and thank you for agreeing to this interview.
My pleasure, Martin, and good morning.
Good morning. Now, you were recorded asking your CEO to change the tone of the report, which is laying out the pros and cons of the two options. And the options are whether Surrey is divided into 2 or 3 unitaries. It is a report, I understand, that's being copied to all boroughs and districts in Surrey, because your CEO has taken the lead in analysing the choice. That is correct, isn't it?
That's correct. So this is a report of all 11 districts and boroughs. Obviously, lots of officers across the county have been working on that. But I think it's just worth me saying, I mean, I've been on here with you before, Martin. I'm a fairly straight shooter on these things. From my perspective, you've got a county document being prepared that argues very clearly for 2 unitaries. I don't think that most people want 2 unitaries. That for us would be a council from Staines to Hazelmere with no localist view whatsoever. We've obviously done the work assessing 2 and 3 unitaries in this borough and district document, and what you've heard me effectively ask there is to make sure that the document properly pushes the 3 unitaries that the districts and boroughs want to see.
Okay, but you actually did ask for the report to be a bit more skewed towards actively promoting 3 unitary
Yeah,
authorities.
and I'll
And
tell
that
you
is
exactly
your
what I mean by it.
preference. You
Yeah,
did use
yeah,
that word skewed. And
yeah.
if you look up the definition of skewed, it does, the dictionary would say that means that you're misleading people by skewing things.
Right. So obviously not the most ideal choice of words, even I'm going to admit that. But what I'm really saying here is that we've got a report, 2 reports going to government potentially on LGR. You've got a county report that whether anybody agrees with it or not, and whether the evidence base is sound or not, and I have to say I don't believe it to be. The county are making a point for 2 unitaries. Now, the districts and boroughs have actually done what we said we do at the start of this process and assess the evidence 2 versus 3 and come to our conclusions. But the problem with doing that is that actually what it sounds like, it's a bit woolly. It sounds like we don't know what we want. Now, some of this is about how the evidence is, and some of it's about what we actually, as local politicians, think is right for our communities. And if you look at what the government are actually asking in this, there are some elements that are, serious financial and technical data, and there are other elements that are non-financial that are basically making your case for what you actually think is right and what you want. Now, what I've been asking, and to be quite honest, most of the other borough districts and borough district leaders in the county have said too, is that we think that big unitaries covering vast portions of Surrey aren't good for residents for lots of different ways. And there are good financial justifications why 2 unitaries don't work, but also because you need to have some kind of local connection for people and some kind of territory that they as residents understand. So whilst I accept that the wording I used was not ideal, this is more about making sure the document tone makes the case for government that is not confusing or ambiguous.
But it's not just not ideal, it's wrong, isn't it, Paul?
Oh, it is not the word I should have really used. It's not
No,
what I mean, to be
I
honest. Let's
mean,
be fair.
surely you can understand how someone looking at that in isolation, as some people will, could draw a conclusion that you're asking for a biased report.
They could draw that conclusion, bearing in mind that the people who are pushing this out are Conservatives who have heard me talk about this pretty much every single week for the past 6 weeks and know where I stand and know the detail on this.
But if it
You
was
can
the other way
understand.
around, you'd be criticising the Conservatives, wouldn't you?
I probably wouldn't in this case because, in fairness, this is a very, very complicated process and everybody's just trying to do their best. I cannot stress how many hours basically lead members and officers have been working on these proposals. And keep in mind, Conservatives are the ones that asked for this to be done in this rushed way at the county and locally. So we're all just trying to do our best for residents and to make sure we get through this well.
Now, all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we use the wrong words sometimes. That's true. But when we do, shouldn't we apologize and say, no, I got that wrong?
Absolutely. And just to be clear, I'm very happy to do that. I absolutely used a word that I didn't really mean in that context. And I hope I've explained what I'm talking about since. So I do apologize for any concern that that's caused. I think I'll just also give reassurance that the document the district and boroughs have produced is not just clear in its conclusions and the evidence, but it is showing its workings, presenting the evidence and making its case. The bits that are less based in, technical financial evidence are those areas where we're making a case for localism and proper representative democracy. Those are obviously political and officer judgments. And from my point of view, it's just making it clear that we think the best position for Surrey is to have councils that are as connected to local people as possible.
Will you also be apologising to your CEO? Because you put him in a rather invidious position there in a meeting. I mean, he shouldn't, in my view, as a former civil servant of about 20 years, he shouldn't have agreed to what you asked. He should have pointed out that the report hopefully isn't going to be skewed. But nonetheless, you did put him in an invidious position there, didn't you?
And I've already apologised to my CEO, made sure that he's all in the right place as well.
Okay.
I think just from his position, I mean, obviously he can speak for himself, but from his position, he's been given a very clear steer by all the district and borough leaders. Because keep in mind, this is a process owned by all of us. I mean, I can't make, and nor can Pedro make, any unilateral decisions on a document that is owned by 11 district and borough leaders. So what he, I believe, is confirming with me there is he has been given the steer to proactively make the case for 3 unitaries in the document that we're presenting. Now, the evidence, as far as I think any of us are concerned, is very clear on that. And actually, Martin, you will see the county proposition and the districts and borough position, I believe, in full by the close of business today. So these reports are imminent this Friday.
Okay, so presumably you're not going to be complying with the request of the Conservatives to resign.
Shockingly, Conservatives don't like me and tend to want me to not be here. So, no, I won't be complying with their request to resign. As far as I'm concerned, I have a duty to represent the people of Waverley in these negotiations with the county and with the government. And I have a duty to make sure that the successor councils are the best they can be. Now, you have to remember here too, this whole process was requested by the Conservatives and at pace, and I think that pace adds risk. But the other problem we've got here too is you've got former Conservative boroughs, like when Woking was Conservative controlled, Spelthorne, which I think is going to be an issue fairly soon as well, Runnymede and a few other places whose debts are now causing a huge issue in this process. And I think the county have shown that they want to just have a big council that they feel they can run, so they can move beyond the bad narratives that they've set up in these Tory controlled places, and as well as the county's own problems. I mean, 14 days of operational reserves the county council has. They're about to have data released showing how many fines they've received on their lack of ability to provide children's services and send properly. The county is, I think, probably 18 to 24 months on, from a serious problem itself. And that's why they're so eager to get this done, so they can pretend to residents that everything's been fine when in fact it hasn't. That's why they were so keen not to have elections.
Okay. And as far as I understand it, from what I've been told, it's inevitable or almost inevitable that Guildford and Waverley will be grouped with Woking, whichever way it goes on the unitaries. Is that your understanding?
Well, I mean, I think you can say just as a function of geography, Guildford and Waverley will have to be together because it's just impossible to say otherwise. There are several different permutations of 3 unitaries that could obviously function whilst maintaining some semblance of population limits that the government are after. So you've got, Guildford, Waverley, Surrey Heath, Guildford, Waverley, Mold Valley, theoretically, Guildford, Waverley, Woking. I think the thing I would flag, and this is going to be something that a lot of us are going to be saying over the course of the next couple of weeks, particularly next week. None of these unitaries, whether they're 2 or 3, can absorb the debt of the places that have got serious debt right now, because they can't legally create new councils that would be bankrupt on day one.
Right.
So if we're saying Guildford, Waverley, Woking, or Guildford, Waverley, Surrey Heath, or any of these other combinations, or the whole of West Surrey that might include debts from Spelthorne and Woking, theoretically, none of these councils can exist without the debt question being resolved. So I'm making the point, and this is one of the other things, just going back to the reason for this call, because local government is likely to be set in this way now for the next sort of 50 years. It certainly was last time this happened in the 70s. We need to make sure that what system we bring in place in the next few months is right for residents and not based on a very temporary financial and debt position racked up by some profligate Conservative councils. So we need to make sure this works for residents in the long run. And actually, the debt will have to be resolved as part of that before it even moves forward at all. And the government do recognise this.
Okay. Councillor Paul Follows, thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin.